Appreciate everybody coming today. Welcome and thank you for being here. My name is Richard Marion, and in the last 48 hours, the office of the County Commissioner Jeff Rader called me. Mr. Rader would like to make a short presentation followed by a short question and answer period. Today's meeting and presentations are meant to be an introduction to what the process is all about. There is a lot of information to process, and we will continue to meet for open dialogue. So right now, what I'd like to do is get things started, and I'd like to give a warm welcome to Jeff Rader.
Well, thank you all, and thanks for coming out early this morning into this beautiful neighborhood next to this beautiful piece of property. As Richard said, I'm Jeff Rader. I'm your District 2 Commissioner. I represent this part, this side of Briarlake Road now. In the 2012 redistricting, the North Lake precinct, which is on the other side, went to District 1. So if y'all are from that side, you're very important to this process, as I'll explain later, because we're going to need support in committing public funding to help to improve the preservation of green space here. We are here to talk about a development proposal that has been made for what's commonly called the Cathy property, which consists of, I think it's about 20 acres, that is this major piece here that is south of Amberwood and west of Briarlake, but also includes 2 pieces on the north of Amberwood and on the east of Briarlake. They're smaller pieces, but they're part of the property that's in play now. Since I had was elected and started to serve in 2007, people from this neighborhood have been, bringing my attention to and encouraging the county to acquire this property for green space. And certainly it is an ideal example of a piece of property that we need to preserve for green space. And over this past 8 years, I've been working to try to figure out a way to buy this land outright for public green space purpose. Mr. Cathy and his fellow heirs, members of an estate, have economic goals that they're trying to achieve with the land. And over this past 8 years, we've appraised the property, we've negotiated with Cathy, we've looked at a variety of different ways to acquire it, and we could never come to terms on a transaction price. Part of the problem with that is that, the county has to be bound by 2 official appraisals that we have made to industry standards, and our appraisals would never meet his purchase price. So over time, we've even sort of postured ourselves to say that, well, we're looking at condemning this property to try to get him to the table and stuff. And Mr. Cathy, is, I think, a conscientious person. He's clearly not a real estate, sort of specialist or professional. He is part of a group of heirs. And so many of the different options that would help to close that gap aren't necessarily ones that he was familiar with or comfortable with. Things like, splitting off development rights and, working to potentially develop part of the property and other things like that. So we were looking at all sorts of different options to come to a conclusion, but could never get there. Recently, about maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I think, some folks that are in the development business came to us and said, look, we've got our eyes on this property and we want to know what you think about it. They were thinking in terms of conventional development. They wanted to test to see if the existing zoning was going to be the bottom line, or if they could get higher density and that sort of a thing, as any developer will do. There is no reason that if this land were developed in its entirety, that it should be developed at anything other than R100. What that would mean is lots very similar to these on very similar sorts of streets. But obviously it wouldn't, just like these neighborhoods, it wouldn't come with any public green space. So you've got great green space in your backyard, you've got a nice front yard, but there's no neighborhood green space, places where people can gather and meet on a casual basis, that sort of a thing. And so you can do 43 lots as R100 at that site. But at that point I said, well, you know, over the years we've really been trying to figure out a way to preserve this land for green space and at the same time, you know, meet the economic needs of the developer. And so this was of interest to the developer that eventually got this land under contract with Kathy. And the proposal that is now going first before you as a neighborhood meeting on Monday, then next before our community council, and Pat, you're a member of the community council, and other folks will go before the community council, which is a citizen group of people that review proposed changes in planning and zoning, and then ultimately to our planning commission, and finally before the county commission, I think in November. The proposal that they now have before you is for something that's called a, quote, conservation subdivision. The idea behind a conservation subdivision is to leave the yield at the same level that it would be under the existing zoning. So, as I mentioned before, 43 lots, but that they would differently configure and cluster the lots so that some of the land would remain undeveloped. And that's good news, because that's certainly first, a very developable piece of land. There's really no water on it. It's pretty flat. You know, as development land goes, it's pretty good. And frankly, from my perspective, as parkland, you know, those same qualities make it very attractive for parkland, because unfortunately in DeKalb and other places, you have many parks that are simply ravines or other places that are undevelopable. The developer didn't want them back in the 50s or 60s or 70s, and they said, well, we'll give that to the county and let them worry about it. But this case, this is very, every piece of it, arguably, except for the ones that are, you know, the out parcels, are very attractive from a perspective of parkland. So anyway, with this conservation subdivision idea, you cluster the development, and then part of that land is left undisturbed, or, you know, for green space purposes. The downside of that is that under our conservation subdivision ordinance, that land doesn't have to be openly accessible and available to the public. It can be their own private park. And so whereas you preserve green space, and in many cases that in and of itself is a good goal, is to simply try to make sure that all the trees don't get mowed down in the development process, but you don't actually get a public space. So the idea that I'm very interested in is to use public funds to transfer then that private park, if we come to an agreement on the conservation subdivision, to public use, and then more than that, go ahead and actually expand it beyond what it would be required as a conservation subdivision, lower the number of houses, and preserve as much of that property as possible. To push the development to the periphery and away from, you know, the part that we want to preserve as a park, and ultimately be able to then put that property into public domain, and then engage this community on how to improve and feature the park. So that might include, you know, first of all, do we clear the privet? You know, are there areas in there that we want grass to be? Is there a picnic, you know, are there picnic tables or a gazebo or something like that there, a playground, et cetera, et cetera. That whole process is a process that would occur after we were successful in acquiring the property. And we've had good success with groups around the neighborhood. You may be familiar with the new Springbrook Park off of Fraser Road, which was 2 building lots that the neighborhood came to us and said, you know, we'd like to see this as a park. We'll work to, you know, figure out what the park ought to be like. We'll raise some money, et cetera, et cetera. And they've had very good success. There's several other places in, you know, Central DeKalb and District 2 where we've worked with the neighborhoods in order to make those small acquisitions of property something that the neighborhood likes. So what we're looking at now is going through this process. There's first the entitlement process and the consideration of the actual conservation subdivision, which is a decision that we have to vote and make. And if everybody said, no, 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 we just want a conventional subdivision here, you know, that would certainly be an important consideration as we consider that. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is the notion of expanding that green space and acquiring as much as possible for public use and to transfer what would be private green space into the public realm for us all to enjoy. Now, in the entitlement process, the community has prerogatives, and we can impose things that are called conditions on zoning. So, for instance, if we wanted to impose a particular, configuration of the neighborhood, we can do that. We can base it on a site plan, is what that's called. If we wanted to, articulate some architectural controls that we think that would make the neighborhood more compatible with, this neighborhood, or just, something that would not be offensive to people around here, we can talk about that. Now, all of those things are subject to negotiation, and if we said that we had to put up, pink minarets or something like that, the developer would probably say, well, I don't think I can sell that. So, they're all negotiations. They have to be based upon the best interest of all the parties involved. But the good news is that we can start to engage on some of those details in order to be able to reach an agreement that everybody can come to. My interest and my obligation to this, obviously, is to people that live right around here. But it's broader than that. As a commissioner that serves District 2, I have 140,000 constituents, and we have other constituents that aren't in District 2, the people that live on the other side of Briarlake. And, if we're going to do a park here, then we want to make sure that, it is, for instance, we wouldn't want the park to only be accessible by one point right here at the end of Castle Way. We want it to be a place that people could walk to from all points, because they're all paying the taxes that are necessary to support that parks program. So I'm working in a broad public interest, but I'm also very sensitive to your interest as a neighborhood in being able to make all of this work. So, that's the fundamental presentation. Right now, my goal is to see this park basically surrounded by public rights-of-way so that it's accessible from all sides, and not to see any development inside of, that area. Not to have anybody's backyard back up to the public park, because my experience is people always feel as though a park in your backyard is sort of an invasion of the public realm into your backyard privacy. And to do it in such a way that minimizes the number of, driveways that are, creating both impervious surface as well as, extra traffic and busyness on the street and that type of a thing. And then, once we get the piece of land, we can really dig in to the notion of how the park ought to be configured. So I guess that's as much as I need to talk about initially, Richard, and I can take questions.
And again, today is meant to be an introduction. There's going to be tons of questions, but what I'd like to do right now, Commissioner Rader has got a full schedule today. We'll take several questions from the audience, and if anybody's got any questions, please raise your hand, and we'll go from there. So we'll start, and we're going to have about a 10-minute Q&A, because I have a whole agenda as well. So we're going to I'm going to go from right to left. So we'll start here, right here, right. And tell me your name and what neighborhood you live in.
Oh, I'm Joel Nash. Grew up right down here on the corner in 2050 Amberwood, and now I live just on the other side of Briarlake.
Okay.
So, it sounds like the process is going to be multi-step, ultimately to the county level. Why is it that we have basically 48 hours to make up our mind at this stage whether we want to commit to this conservation plan as we understand it?
Oh, you don't. You've got months.
Oh, I understood that Monday we had to make a decision.
No. What happens on Monday is you're simply going to hear what the developer proposes, and then you're going to give him some feedback. And the idea behind the community meeting is that he's going to respond to that feedback in the application that he ultimately makes. He has not formally made application for this conservation subdivision, mechanism. So the idea behind the community meeting is for people in the community to say, here are the 5 things that we really think is important. One of those things might be, we don't like the whole idea, and so if you've got to develop it as a, conventional R100 subdivision, we can't stop you, but we're going to fight this other thing. And that will, that would be information. If everybody said that, then he would probably be thinking twice about going for the conservation subdivision at all. So all this is really the kickoff of the process. This is even sort of a pre-kickoff. This is the tailgate party before the kickoff. And then that process goes all the way through November with public hearings at every stage.
Okay, let me just raise your hand so I know how many people are going to ask a question. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, I got it right here. Debbie,
Hey,
go ahead.
Debbie Miller. I live in Randolph Estates.
Great.
I noticed the developer's name is Arrowhead Real Estate,
Yeah.
and the house down here is called Arrowhead. Is there any relation to, did that person live in this neighborhood?
Lived in the house.
Yes.
Yeah, one of
One
them
of them.
did, and I can't remember that fellow's name. Y'all remember?
Not Brian, it's the other guy.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And then two-pronged, if I may.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so now that we know what the selling price is, what the Cathys are willing to take.
Do we know?
Well, I don't know. I thought
Oh,
we
I
did.
don't know. No, that's between
Oh,
them.
okay.
But what I've been led to believe is that, they have agreed on a selling price, and that selling price may yield this opportunity for this type of development. But
I
no,
thought you knew the
not only do we not know what their contract price is, but they don't know what our appraisals of the property are and the money that we have, set away for it. So we're still trying to, protect your interests as a taxpayer and not, laying all our cards on the table.
Okay.
Okay, let's go with you.
I'm Paul Hurd. I live in Everwood on the Briarlake Woods Way. We're going to see their current proposals. So far, they've floated 3 proposals. We don't know what's real and what's not real. And we're supposed to make some, and we're citizens. We're not hydrologists.
Right.
We're not engineers. We're not traffic engineers. So we're supposed to make an educated opinion on Monday night. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's proper. I think we have to understand what their real proposal is, because the first one was ridiculous. I could understand it as a citizen. And I haven't had a chance to look at the other 2.
Okay.
So I'm concerned about, A, is this the real deal, or are they going to bait and switch at the end? And is this what happens at these kinds of developments?
Right.
At number 1. And number 2, where do we get a chance to look at the expert opinion? I know that the Planning Commission is ultimately going to look at it, and then the Board of Commissioners is going to vote on it. But in between those 2 evaluations, is the community going to get a chance to look at and understand it? And if we object, are we going to have an opportunity to object then?
Sure. And here's the way that goes. And, it's unlikely that, based upon the maturity of this neighborhood, that y'all have had to deal with many rezoning issues, right? Okay, so a proper angle of attack, I think, is important, as you start to develop your strategy. Again, this first step is for you to give input, not approval, okay? Because it's premature, as you point out, for you to decide whether or not you think that you would go along with this. What I think would be most useful for people at this initial meeting to do is talk about the general concepts that you want to achieve. Perhaps you want to, save this green space. Again, some people may say, well, no, I don't like this whole idea at all. I'm simply against anything but R100 lots. And so if you want to develop it as an R100 subdivision, I don't like that, but it's your land and I can't do anything. Or, you can say, perhaps on the other end of that spectrum is, we'd like to see as much of this property preserved as green space as possible. Some people may say, well, we kind of prefer the private park idea because now we know that none of the riffraff from North Lake will come down here. Or, you might, on the other end of that spectrum, say, this has absolutely got to be public green space, and if this whole process goes through and it doesn't become public, then it's not really in our interest and we won't be supportive of it. So, those sort of concepts are very important. The notion, oh, well, we're very concerned about the architectural character and we want to work on that particular issue, would then give them the cue to come back and say, okay, we're going to have some meetings on architecture and we're going to spend some money, because we're developers, right? And so we're more concerned about subdivision than we are about buildings, but we're going to spend some money and some effort on developing those architectural controls. So this first meeting is really important for you to identify the areas of interest that you have and the things that you'll want to negotiate on on an ongoing basis. Once you have that meeting, then he, as I said, may change his proposal when he actually applies. You know, if everybody throws cold water on the conservation subdivision, he may just decide not to apply and go about the subdivision process. But all that really is supposed to do is better inform his understanding of neighborhood priorities. But then as you go through the community council, there's a public hearing and an opportunity for input. The community council then takes that into account and makes a recommendation. The planning commission, likewise, is an opportunity for there will be more detail at the planning commission meeting that will include a staff analysis that you can then review, and you can comment on that staff analysis, so you'll then have a technical document in your hand in time for the planning commission meeting. And then obviously that same analysis will be available for the county commission meeting, which will occur a couple of weeks later. We don't have to make a decision at that point. We can push it off, but you know, we would like to, you know, deal with it.
Okay,
Go
we're
ahead.
going to take a couple more questions.
Okay, I'm Barbara Salzer. I live right across the street from the proposed development. Question, is the Kathy house itself, is that included in the sale, or is that?
Yes, that is included in the sale, so it would be the entire property, yes.
Is he going to still live there, or is that house?
If he sells it, I think he's moving, because to my knowledge, there's no provision for a life estate or any other thing like that.
Okay, because it looked like in one of the developments that one of the things that the house was like still there. I didn't, you know.
Well, I think that it is within the area that they're proposing to, but my understanding is Mr. Cathy does not intend to remain.
All right, let's go. I'm going to I got to
Yeah,
take
go ahead.
3 more questions, and then we got to go all the way in the back.
I'm Lisa Patrick. I live on Exeter Court, Mr. Murphy Street on the other side of Briarlake. 2 quick questions. I presume that you had thorough discussions with the Cathy family about all the conservation easements that might be applicable.
Yeah, I mean, we worked hard to try to get him to, you know, do that.
Because there are good tax advantages. Is Arrowhead the actual developer, or are they simply a broker?
I think that they intend to, you know, carry the process through to the point at which they sell the lots, yeah.
Okay, all right, I'm going to shift over. Go ahead. Yeah.
Clell Beaver, around Castaway Lane here. The house, the tax records say that house is
Louder.
I'll do my best. The tax records indicate that house was built in 1863.
Right.
Okay, that's one of the oldest, you know,
Probably
frame
the
houses.
core of that house, you probably can't see the
I'm
part.
sure of that,
Right.
but it's one of the oldest structures, you know,
Right.
in DeKalb County from that standpoint
Right.
of the residents. Just, you initially mentioned an interest in the whole property, obviously.
Right.
You said your comment later was that you wanted to see parkland surrounded by public right-of-way,
Yes.
which is part of the plan, right? The streets that would be put in to cut through
Yes,
here.
that will be part of the
So,
plan.
but you're
right.
talking about from that standpoint of the 6-acre park.
Well, it could be bigger than that.
Okay.
Your question is?
The question is there a difference in the economics to Mr. Cathy and the developer as to whether it gets the RCN designation versus the R100? Because those are 6,000 square foot minimums instead of 15,000 square foot minimum lots, right?
Yes, but we can negotiate the particular size of the lot. So again, the
Okay.
plat will be part of it.
Okay, so from the standpoint of the county potentially buying that.
The idea
whole-
is that the yield of lots would be the same. The size of the lots may be smaller.
I understand. I'm trying to get at the economics though, because does this plan make it more profitable for them than other plans and make it more difficult for the county to buy it?
Yeah.
I'm interested in how much money does the county have
Oh, yeah.
available? They
Well,
raised $248 million.
Okay,
in 02?
yeah, and it's fairly complex, but suffice it to say that at least, you know, to the extent that they have an obligation to preserve green space, that land essentially becomes undevelopable. So its value should go down as a result of it no longer being developable. And so therefore the cost to the county should go down. So now, if we continue to buy additional lots, well, you know, I mean, we'll have to negotiate the price of those additional lots. He may have other advantages. I mean, you know, there is good data that says that houses that front on public open space are more valuable on a square foot basis than houses that, you know, don't. You know, there are increasingly people that don't want, you know, a half-acre lot, but instead want, you know, a smaller lot, and so
But
there
that
are other
requires a zoning
economics.
change.
What?
That requires a zoning change to RCN,
Yes,
right?
that's right. That
And economics is not a hardship that he can claim to
Oh,
get a
no.
zoning change?
No, this is entirely discretionary. He has an economic use of this property as R100. Right.
Okay, I'm gonna move on. I really want to get everybody's question. I think you wanted to ask
Oh,
one.
yeah, what's the chance that this will be?
And I know.
This is very
We're
important.
gonna, hold on, we're gonna take your question, and then we're gonna take like 2 more questions over here.
What's the chance that this will be a gated community?
Well, I think we can keep it from being a gated community. And moreover, the configuration of the out parcels don't really, lend themselves to that. And every time that we've negotiated, we wanted to make sure that, we had a good interface between the public realm and the private realm, not having fences in front of stuff, not having gated communities. So, yeah, that's certainly something that will be a priority.
Okay, we'll go to you.
Okay, yeah, I just want to address a couple things.
Short.
In the context of everybody's concerns, I think that there is a couple of fundamental issues. One being that, we feel like reflected in the names of the neighborhoods that the defining character of the neighborhood has to do with wood. Okay, and we're down to the very last tracts of wood. So this isn't a normal situation where we've got lots of land to choose from and this is just one plot. This is like the last, okay? So, it's in amber wood across from green wood acres next to, Leafmore to, all these different, so we would rename the neighborhood, Amber Gone, Briarcliff Street, Leafless.
Yes, I agree.
So that's what we're dealing with.
I agree.
Okay, so
Get to your point.
Within the context of what's happening around us, it's frightening. If you look at the development at Druid Hills and La Vista, clear cut completely.
Right.
I have friends in Diamond Head where there's one last tract of land. Developer came in and clear cut everything before anybody knew what was going on.
How did that even happen?
We'll deal with one.
We're fighting the Amberwood thing. If you want to talk about that, I can tell you more.
Okay, but that's the context in which we're operating.
I understand.
So with all that, we're very sensitive to what's happening here, and we'd like to see that there's some influence in the community as to which direction this heads.
All right. So is that your question or
comment?
Well, I do understand
Important
there's a mutual, the DeKalb County Land Conservation Mutual Program where the county can partner with private to come up with funds to buy tracts of land.
Yeah, I mean, we have funds available to buy what we can of this. We would have bought
the
whole.
mutual, that would, maybe there's enough people in the neighborhood that would partner with the county.
Well, we certainly will be looking, if we do acquire this, what we'll probably do is partner with the neighborhood to do the quote improvement.
Okay.
And when I say improvement, I mean,
All right. And last question.
Quick question. What's the price point on these houses? What was the appraised value of the land? And what's the shortfall between what they were offered and what you offered?
Okay. The price point on the houses obviously is something that can be factored into the negotiation. Typically, new housing is going to be a higher price point than the existing housing in the neighborhood, notwithstanding the different configurations. And we'll be able to know that. And but I don't have any negotiated or really good intel on exactly what they plan as price points.
The developer said high 700,000.
Okay, so there you go. And they're going to try to maximize that because that always increases their lot size or their lot price. As to these other numbers, first, I don't know what they have it under contract with him. That's a private contract. Second, I'm not at liberty to discuss what our appraisals are or what we have available, because we want to make sure that we don't pay any more than we have to. If we were to, say to them, we have, $10 million, and we, the public really wants this land, well, then the price becomes $10 million. And that, so as a matter of trying to negotiate in your interest to minimize the cost of the acquisition, we can't tell you, and by extension him, how much our appraisal is. But
so the problem is that if we wanted to, as a community, raise funds to do a partnership to buy that land, we need to know what that goal would look like.
Right, and so, what another buyer could do is to estimate that price themselves. I mean, you can get an appraisal, but you can see why we don't want to put our appraisal on the table, because then it's public information, and then he knows how much we think it's worth.
Right.
Okay. All right. I want to congratulate Mr. Rader on coming and giving a talk today. So thank you. Thank you very much. All right. know
Good.
you got a busy schedule today, so
All right.
thank you for coming, and we
And,
certainly appreciate it.
You know, our office, we have a website, CommissionerRader.com. You can sign up there to get, you know, a lot of information if you want them on your email. Our email address is jrader@DeKalbCountyGA.gov. I'll leave a couple of business cards over here at the table, but y'all can certainly know where to get us. Both working through your neighborhood associations as well as this public process, we should be able to fully recognize what you've got to say, you know, about all of this, and we'll work very hard to address your concerns. Please also understand that, first of all, you know, we do have some expertise in this area, and so you know, I'm a professional planner. We have professional planners on staff. We have people to evaluate issues like traffic and other things. So please understand that we do have real, legitimate resources available to you, and that I am sincerely committed to acting in your and the public's interest. This is not intended to be, you know, either for Mr. Cathy, for the developer. It's intended to be for all of y'all. And so for people on both sides of the street, from throughout the county, for people that live in this neighborhood. So we've got to balance those interests, but we are working, you know, and I know it's hard, you know, sometimes to sort of separate out what you hear about the county on one side, and then on the other side, think about the county acting legitimately in your interest.
And what
But,
we see all around us happening, like
Yeah.
clear cutting left and right. I mean, come on, you got to accept that that's the reality that we're dealing with.
well, I understand, and again, part of this is because this is private property.
Yep.
And, you know, in the same way that if, you know, he wanted to cut that tree,
Yep.
he'd have a right to cut it. You know, we've also got to honor property rights. But it doesn't mean that we're not working to maximize your interest.
And tree ordinances that aren't
Okay, all right, and so the last question, I'm going to do the last question. Can the community in general basically propose and ultimately decide what area could be green space so that the entryway into Amberwood could technically be green space? Do we have the right and request that
You
area
can certainly
becomes-
request it, but y'all won't decide that.
Okay.
It'll be the county commission that ultimately decides what's, again, in this larger public interest, trying to maximize the green space interest, trying to maximize the access interest, and then ultimately trying to maintain the integrity of these neighborhoods. So ultimately, you know, these decisions are vested with your elected representatives, and it's myself and Commissioner Watson. One other thing that I just need to tell you is that we're right at the intersection of 3 commission districts, okay? On the other side of Briarlake is now Commission District 1. Right, well, we don't know who, but you'll have a commissioner by the time that happens. And they are, you know, you're their constituents on that side. You should be talking to them. Commissioner Stan Watson is the District 7 Super District Commissioner. He is accountable to people in this neighborhood. You need to be talking to him. Obviously, I am accountable to you, and the rest of the commissioners are accountable to you, but don't forget that you have other people to talk to as it relates to this, and that the decision makers ultimately are the Board of Commissioners.
Okay.
Not
All right.
Kathy Gannon.
All right, let me,
Kathy is in District 6, this is not in District 6, but Kathy's very interested, and I think that she'll be supportive of the community.
all right, a round of applause.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you.